The forest on the edge of the human colony was quiet that morning. The sun had just started to rise, casting a soft orange glow over the tall silver-leafed trees. Birds chirped lazily, and the wind whispered through the branches. It seemed like any other peaceful day on the planet Ceres 9. Leo, a young human engineer, walked along the narrow trail with his backpack over one shoulder. He had come to collect parts from a crashed drone the scouts had reported. It wasn't part of his main job, but he liked getting away from the noise of the colony. The forest felt calm, clean, real. As he neared the spot where the drone was supposed to be, he stopped. Something didn't feel right. The air was cold. Not normal cold, but wrong cold. His breath showed in the air, even though it was the warm season. Leo's hand moved to the small scanner on his belt. The device beeped, then blinked red. Unregistered life sign. Close, it said in a robotic voice. Leo's eyes narrowed. Could be a new animal, maybe just a damaged sensor. Still, he stepped carefully. Then he saw her. Just behind a thick tree trunk, half covered in leaves and dirt, was a small figure. At first, Leo thought it was a child, but as he came closer, he realized this wasn't human. She had pale blue skin, almost icy in tone, and long white hair tangled with leaves. Her ears were pointed, small like an elf from Earth Stories. She wore a torn silver-gray suit, clearly not made by human hands, and she was shivering badly. Leo dropped to one knee. "Hey, are you okay?" he said softly. She flinched and tried to crawl back, but her arms were too weak. Her violet eyes locked onto his face, wide and filled with fear. She didn't answer, just stared at him, lips slightly open. "It's okay," Leo said, gently placing his scanner down to show he wasn't a threat. "I'm not here to hurt you." He took off his jacket and moved slowly, wrapping it around her small shoulders. She winced but didn't fight. Her skin was ice cold. "You're freezing," he whispered. The girl didn't respond. Her breathing was shallow, and her body was trembling. She looked like she hadn't eaten or slept in days. Leo looked around. If colony security found her first, things wouldn't go well. There had been warnings, broadcasts saying a dangerous alien life form had escaped from a research center. But looking at her now, weak and scared, she didn't seem dangerous at all. She looked lost. Leo made a choice. "Come on, I'll help you." He carefully picked her up in his arms. She was light, too light. Her head leaned against his chest, and for a second, her hand gripped his shirt. It wasn't strength, it was fear. She was holding on to something, anything. Leo carried her off the main path and deeper into the forest. He knew of an old hunting shed nearby, abandoned years ago. It wasn't much, but it was dry and hidden. The shed creaked as he opened the door. Dust filled the air, but it was better than nothing. He laid her down on a pile of old blankets and started a small heater with his backup battery. She opened her eyes again as the warmth reached her. For a second, her lips moved. "Laureen," she whispered, voice broken and dry. Leo blinked. "Is that your name?" She said nothing else, but her eyes slowly closed again, her body relaxing just slightly under the warm air. Leo sat beside her, unsure what he had just gotten himself into. Who was she? Why was she out here? And why did the colony think she was dangerous? He didn't know the answers. But one thing was certain, she was alone. And for now, he would stay. Leo stayed awake the whole night, sitting beside the alien girl in the small forest shed. She didn't move much, only shifted slightly under the old blankets when the wind whistled through the cracks in the wood. The little heater gave off a soft warmth, just enough to stop her from freezing again. Leo looked at her sleeping face. She was young, maybe his age or even younger. Her skin looked softer now, not as pale as before. The jacket he had wrapped around her still covered her shoulders. She held onto one corner of it tightly, like she was afraid someone would take it away. The name she had whispered before, Laureen, echoed in his mind. He had never seen anyone like her before, not just in appearance, but in presence. There was something strange and beautiful about her, something gentle. Morning sunlight slipped through a broken window, and finally the girl opened her eyes. Leo leaned forward. "Hey, good morning. Do you remember me?" She blinked slowly and looked at him. There was no fear this time, only confusion. He smiled and gently touched his chest. "Leo, that's my name. Leo." She watched him carefully. Then, after a few seconds, she touched her own chest. "Laureen," she whispered. Leo nodded. "Laureen. Got it." There was silence again. Not awkward, just quiet. Leo stood up and grabbed a small bag from the corner. He had brought emergency supplies, some water packs, fruit, and protein bars. He opened one and held it out to her. Laureen looked at it, unsure. "It's food," Leo said. He took a bite from his own bar to show her it was safe. Then he offered it again. Slowly, with shaky hands, she reached out and took it. She smelled it first, then nibbled carefully. After a moment, she began eating faster, clearly starving. Leo handed her water next. She drank like she hadn't had a drop in days. "You poor thing," he muttered softly. After eating, Laureen sat up a little straighter. Her eyes studied the room, the objects, and finally him. She pointed to his scanner lying on the ground. Leo picked it up and showed her. It's just a scanner. It found you yesterday." She nodded slowly, then reached toward it. Her fingers moved quickly across the buttons. Leo's eyes widened. "You know how to use this." She tapped the screen again. The scanner flashed, then showed a symbol he didn't recognize, a strange curve with stars drawn around it. What is that?" Leo asked. Laureen didn't answer in words. She picked up a stick from the floor and began drawing in the dust. First, a star, then a planet, and then a large building with people inside. Her hand hesitated before drawing a cage. Leo stared at the drawing. "You were captured," he said quietly. Laureen looked into his eyes and nodded. "So you escaped. That's why they're looking for you. But they think you're dangerous." Leo paused. "You're not, are you?" She shook her head slowly. Then, without warning, she reached out and placed her small hand over his. Her touch was cold but soft. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Leo understood. "I won't let them find you," he said. "Not until we figure out what to do." Outside, birds sang, and the breeze picked up, but the moment inside the shed felt still, peaceful. Over the next few hours, Leo fixed up the shed as best as he could. He blocked the broken window, moved dry wood into the corner, and set up a cleaner sleeping space. Laureen watched him work. Sometimes she helped by passing small items or pointing to things he had missed. They didn't speak much, but slowly a silent bond formed. By evening, Leo had to return to the colony for supplies. He stood at the door, unsure how to leave her alone. "I'll come back," he promised. "A few hours, that's all." Laureen looked nervous. She held his jacket close again and stared at him like he might disappear forever. Leo stepped forward and gently touched her hand. "I won't leave you." She didn't answer. But this time, when he turned to go, she stood at the door and watched until he vanished into the trees. Leo returned to the shed in the evening, carrying supplies and some fresh clothes he had borrowed from the colony storage. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the forest bathed in soft twilight. The air was colder now, and Leo could see his breath misting in front of him. He hoped Laureen was okay. He wasn't sure what he expected after leaving her alone for the afternoon. But something inside him told him she would be safe. She wasn't dangerous. She couldn't be. When Leo stepped inside the shed, he found her sitting in the same spot, huddled in the blankets. Her eyes were tired but still bright. She looked up at him as he entered, a faint spark of recognition in her gaze. He smiled. I brought some food and... He froze when he saw her hands. They were covered in strange symbols, drawn in the dust and dirt on the floor. Symbols that weren't from any language he had ever seen. What are these? Leo asked, kneeling beside her. Laureen didn't answer right away. Instead, she traced one of the symbols with her finger, her face calm, focused. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Leo could almost feel the weight of her unspoken words. She picked up the stick and began drawing again, this time making the circle with another set of lines inside. Leo could only guess what she was trying to explain, but there was no mistaking the purpose of her art. It was important to her. Laureen, I need to understand, he said gently. You were held, right? By humans. From the research center. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with a sadness that took Leo by surprise. She closed her eyes briefly, as though remembering something painful. They didn't treat you well. Leo continued, his voice soft. I can tell. Laureen shifted, her gaze dropping to her hands. She paused before slowly nodding again. This time, there was more to her expression. Something deeper than sadness, something heavy. Leo leaned in closer, resting his elbows on his knees. What happened to you, Laureen? Why did you escape? For a long time, Laureen didn't say anything. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Then, in a quiet voice, she spoke. They studied us. My people. She paused, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Used us. Leo's heart sank. He had a feeling it was something like that, but hearing it from her lips made it all too real. They hurt you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She nodded again, more firmly this time. But there was a spark in her eyes, something more than fear, something like fire. Leo swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said. I wish I could have done something sooner. Laureen gave him a look, a mixture of confusion and understanding. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his arm. No, you. Help now. You save me. Leo blinked in surprise. Me? He asked, his voice soft. I didn't do anything. You did, she replied, her voice quieter now. You stay. Leo took a deep breath. I'll keep staying. I won't leave you, I promise. But deep down, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was at play here. He hadn't thought much about the research center or why Laureen had been there. It seemed obvious to him now that it wasn't just some random accident. The colony had brought her people here for a reason. But what was that reason? And what had they done to her and the others? I don't understand, Leo muttered, mostly to himself. Why would they treat you like this? Laureen's eyes flashed, and for the first time, Leo saw the full weight of her anger. We are not toys. We are not experiments. Leo's chest tightened at the fierceness in her voice. She wasn't just an alien girl. She was something more. Something important. I believe you, Leo said softly, and I'll help you get away from them. But we need a plan. Laureen's gaze softened slightly. She was calm again, but there was an intensity in her eyes, like a storm waiting to break. You can't fight them alone, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I can. Leo raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Laureen closed her eyes, drawing in a deep breath. Her hands hovered over the dust on the floor for a moment before she began to sketch again. A large ship, surrounded by stars. It looked like a map. A way out. You know a way out? Leo asked, his heart racing with hope. She nodded slowly. I will take you. Leo stared at her, unsure of what to make of her words, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't joking. She had a plan. She had something more than just survival on her mind. All right, Leo said, his voice steady. We'll do this together. But we need to be careful. If the colony finds out. Laureen's expression grew cold. They won't, she said firmly. Not if we're careful. Leo couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence at her words. If anyone could make it through this, it was Lorraine. And now he was part of it. He would stay by her side, no matter what came next. Leo woke early the next day, as the light from the rising sun spilled through the cracks of the shed. The warmth that had filled the room during the night had now faded, and the cold air seemed to bite. He glanced over at Lorraine, who was still sleeping, her small body curled tightly beneath the blankets. For a moment, he just watched her, wondering how someone so small could have survived everything she had been through. And now she was relying on him. But that wasn't going to be enough. They were still in danger. The colony was actively searching for her. No matter how much Leo wanted to pretend they were safe, the reality was far from that. As Leo quietly moved to gather his things, he couldn't help but wonder what the colony would do if they found out the truth. What if they came looking for her? What if they had already started their search? His thoughts were interrupted by a low sound outside, distant, but getting closer. Leo froze. He quickly moved to the small window and peeked through the broken wood. His heart sank. A small patrol unit from the colony was approaching the forest. They found us, Leo thought. Panic started to rise in his chest, but he quickly shoved it down. He turned back to Lorraine, who was still sleeping soundly. He needed to act fast. Leo grabbed his pack and moved quietly to her side. He gently shook her arm, hoping not to startle her. Her violet eyes opened slowly, and she blinked in confusion for a moment before focusing on his face. "We need to leave now," Leo said urgently, his voice barely above a whisper. Lorraine blinked again, clearly still groggy. But when she saw this seriousness in Leo's eyes, she immediately sat up. Without asking questions, she reached for her jacket and started to pull it on. Leo handed her the small pack he prepared for her, and then looked out the window again. The patrol was close. He didn't have much time. "We're going to take the back trail," Leo said, his voice steady. "We can make it to the cliffside if we hurry. It'll give us a better chance to hide." Lorraine nodded silently, her face full of determination. The moment they stepped outside, Leo felt a chill run down his spine. The trees around them seemed to tower even higher, their shadows deepening the sense of isolation. He could hear the footsteps of the patrol now, faint but unmistakable. The sound of boots on the forest floor. They were close. Too close. Leo motioned for Lorraine to follow him. They moved quickly, keeping low to the ground. The forest was dense, but it was still easier to move through than the open fields. Leo had memorized the routes during his time on the planet, but this was different. This was life or death. He couldn't afford to make mistakes. They kept moving silently, weaving through the trees as quickly as they could. Leo glanced over his shoulder occasionally to make sure Lorraine was keeping up. Her steps light but steady. She had a certain grace, almost like she belonged here, like she was more than just a fugitive. But Leo couldn't afford to think about that now. The patrol was still out there, searching for them. After what felt like an eternity, Leo spotted the cliffside up ahead. The tall rocks jutted out from the forest, and the view beyond them was a vast stretch of wild land, untouched by the colony. The cliffs would give them cover, at least for now. They reached the cliffside just as the patrol passed behind them. Leo pressed his back against the cool rock, his heart pounding in his chest. Lorraine did the same, her body rigid but focused. They both held their breath, waiting for the footsteps to fade. Seconds turned into minutes, and finally, the sound of the patrol grew distant. Leo dared to breathe again. "That was too close," he muttered. Lorraine didn't say anything, but Leo could see the flicker of relief in her eyes. She had stayed calm under pressure. It wasn't just the fear of being caught. It was the fear of what would happen if they were found. Leo knew she understood that. "We can rest here for a bit," Leo said, lowering his voice. "But we need to keep moving." Lorraine nodded and sat down on a flat rock, her legs crossed beneath her. Leo took a seat beside her, keeping an eye on the distant horizon. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just filled with the weight of their situation. Leo glanced at Lorraine. She was staring at the ground, her expression unreadable. But there was a flicker of something deep in her eyes. Her gaze flicked up to meet his, and for the first time since they had met, Leo saw something different in her. "You saved me," Lorraine said softly. "No one ever does that." Leo shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just doing what's right," he replied, though the words didn't feel quite right. It wasn't just about doing what was right. It was about doing what he felt he had to do. "I don't know what will happen next," Leo continued, his voice steady. "But I won't leave you." Lorraine's eyes softened at his words, and for the briefest of moments, there was a quiet understanding between them. They didn't need to speak further. Leo had made his promise, and she had accepted it. For now, that was enough. The wind began to pick up as Leo and Lorraine made their way down the narrow path that led to the edge of the forest. The soft murmur of the leaves was replaced by the increasingly loud whistle of the breeze. The skies above darkened, and clouds gathered quickly, as if the planet itself knew the danger they were in. Leo glanced at Lorraine. She moved quietly beside him, her pale blue skin contrasting against the darkening trees. Her expression was calm, but he knew that inside, she was just as worried as he was. They both felt the weight of the situation. The colony was searching for them, and every moment they spent in the open brought them closer to being found. "We need to find shelter," Leo said, his voice low and urgent. "This storm's coming fast." Lorraine nodded, and without a word, she began to lead the way through the dense underbrush. She knew the forest better than Leo did, her sharp eyes scanning every shadow, every path. Her movements were swift and confident, and Leo followed closely, doing his best to keep up. The wind howled as they reached the clearing. Just ahead, there was a small cave hidden beneath a ridge, barely visible from the trail. It was their only hope of staying safe from the storm. As they rushed toward the cave, the first drops of rain began to fall. The wind pushed them sideways, and the temperature dropped even further. Within moments, the rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind was howling like a beast in the distance. They made it to the cave, panting and soaked. Leo stumbled inside, quickly pulling Lorraine after him. The cave was cool, but it offered shelter from the storm. He couldn't help but feel a little relieved. They were safe for now. He turned to Lorraine, who was shivering slightly from the cold. Her clothes were wet, and her hair clung to her face. Despite the harsh conditions, she managed to smile. "Are you okay?" Leo asked, his voice full of concern. Lorraine nodded, wiping the rain from her face. "I am fine," she said softly. "The storm is familiar." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Familiar? You've seen storms like this before." Lorraine nodded again, this time more slowly. "On my planet, we live with the storms. They come without warning, but we are prepared." She paused for a moment before adding, "But this storm feels different." Leo's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Lorraine looked out at the rain, her expression distant. "There's something about this storm that feels like it's been waiting for us." Leo felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know if it was just her anxiety, or if there was something more to her words, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on them. It wasn't just the storm, it was everything. The colony, the hunt, Lorraine's past, all of it. "We'll stay here for a while," Leo said, trying to push aside the uneasy feeling in his chest. "It's safer than going out in the rain." Lorraine nodded, but she didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the cave's entrance, watching the rain as if it held some kind of secret. Leo sat down beside her, taking out the emergency rations he had brought. He offered her some food, but she declined. Instead, she pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, staring out at the storm. For a while, they both sat in silence, the sound of the rain filling the air. Leo thought about what Lorraine had said about her planet. She had lived through storms before. She had been through things he couldn't even imagine. And yet, she still trusted him. She still held his hand when the world outside felt like it was falling apart. But Leo wasn't sure how much longer they could keep running. The colony was closing in on them. The hunt was getting closer every day. And the more Leo thought about it, the more he realized that they couldn't stay hidden forever. "We need a plan," Leo said, breaking the silence. "I can't keep you hidden here forever. We need to get you off this planet." Lorraine turned to look at him, her violet eyes soft and full of trust. "I know," she said, "but where will we go?" Leo didn't have an answer for her. The galaxy was vast, and the idea of escaping it all felt almost impossible. But one thing he knew for sure. He couldn't leave her. He couldn't let her be taken back to that place where they had treated her like a prisoner. "We'll figure it out," Leo said, his voice steady. "We'll find a way." Lorraine nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "The storm is not just the weather," she said quietly. "It is more than that." Leo looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "The storm is a warning. It comes before change. A storm like this means something will happen. Something big." Leo's stomach tightened. What kind of change? Lorraine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. It was unlike anything Leo had ever seen. It was a small glowing orb with strange markings on its surface. "This will help us," she said softly, holding the device up for Leo to see. Leo stared at it, a feeling of unease rising in his chest. "What is it?" Lorraine's expression was serious. "It's a beacon. A signal. It can lead us to safety, but it will also make us a target." Leo nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. Whatever was coming next, he knew they were in this together. They had no choice but to face whatever the storm was bringing. The storm outside had finally started to calm down. The rain was still falling in a steady rhythm, but the wind had died down, and the thunder had faded to a distant rumble. Leo and Lorraine sat together in the cave, the sound of the rain mixing with the occasional drip of water from the stalactites above them. Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something was out to change. The storm had felt like a warning, just as Lorraine had said. But what was it warning them about? Lorraine held the glowing orb tightly in her hands, her fingers curled around it protectively. She had been quiet for the last few hours, deep in thought. Leo could tell she was preparing herself for something, though he didn't know what. "We can't stay here," Leo said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "We need to move while the storms settle down." Lorraine looked up at him, her eyes serious. "You're right," she replied quietly. "But we can't run forever. The colony will come for us." Leo's heart clenched at the thought. The colony had already been searching for days. It was only a matter of time before they tracked them down. And if they found them here, it would be over. "We have to take a stand," Leo said, his voice firm. He stood up, his fists clenched. "I won't let them take you. I won't let them treat you like that again." Lorraine stood up as well, slowly. She stepped closer to him, her gaze locked on his. "And how will we stand?" she asked softly. "They have soldiers. They have weapons." Leo took a deep breath, thinking for a moment. "We don't need their weapons. We have something better." Lorraine tilted her head slightly, a question in her eyes. "We have each other," Leo said. "And we have the beacon. If we use it, we can contact your people. Maybe they can help us." Lorraine's eyes widened slightly. "You think they'll come?" "I don't know," Leo admitted. "But we have to try. I'm not going to just run away and hide. We'll face them together." For a moment, there was silence between them, only the sound of the rain filling the cave. Then, Lorraine reached out, her hand resting gently on Leo's arm. "You are brave," she said, her voice soft. But this is not just about bravery. It's about survival. And we must be smart. Leo looked down at her hand, the warmth of her touch grounding him. I know, he said quietly, but we can't just let them take you. You're not an experiment. You're not a prisoner. You're a person, and I won't let them forget that. Laureen smiled, a small but genuine smile. I have never met a human like you before. You are different. Leo met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. I don't care what they say. I'll fight for you. For both of us. For the first time in what felt like forever, Laureen looked at him not with fear or sadness, but with something else. Something stronger. Then we fight. Leo's heart raced, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was something else. Determination. He wasn't alone anymore. They weren't alone anymore. They had each other. The sound of footsteps broke through their moment of quiet. Leo froze, and Laureen's eyes went wide. They're here, Leo whispered. The colony. They'd found us. Laureen nodded, a sharpness in her eyes that Leo hadn't seen before. We don't have much time. He glanced around the cave, quickly looking for a way out. But there was no easy escape. The entrance was narrow, and if they ran, they'd be exposed. The only option left was to face them. Leo looked at Laureen, his voice low but steady. We make our stand here. If we're going to fight, we fight on our terms. Laureen didn't hesitate. She reached for the glowing orb in her hand and pressed a small button on its surface. The orb hummed to life, glowing brighter as it sent a pulse of energy into the air. Leo watched as the light expanded, growing in intensity. What's happening? Leo asked, his voice tense. Laureen didn't answer immediately. She stood tall, her eyes focused on the entrance of the cave. I'm sending a signal, she said quietly. To my people. They will come. Leo felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of urgency. He could hear the colony soldiers getting closer, their voices growing louder. They were almost there. They're not far off. Leo said, his voice sharp. Laureen looked at him, her expression fierce. We stand together. We fight together. Leo nodded, determination settling in his chest. There was no going back now. The colony had forced them into this position, and Leo wouldn't let them win. Not without a fight. The sound of the soldiers grew louder. Leo could see the flashlights from their helmets cutting through the darkness outside the cave. They were closing in. Laureen took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the orb. Stay close, she said softly. We are not alone. We will not fall. With that, the entrance of the cave was suddenly illuminated, and the first soldier stepped into view. Leo's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood tall beside Laureen. They had made their choice. Now they would face whatever came next, together. The cave was alive with tension. Leo and Laureen stood side by side, their backs pressed against the cold stone wall as they faced the entrance. The flashing lights from the soldiers' helmets flickered in the distance, growing closer with every passing second. Leo's heart raced. The situation had escalated quickly. The beacon Laureen had activated was sending out a signal, but it was clear they were on their own for the moment. The soldiers weren't far from discovering them. Laureen stood beside him, her presence calm yet fierce. The glowing orb in her hand was still pulsing, its soft light illuminating the cave's walls. She held it like it was the most precious thing she had, her fingers curled tightly around it. Are you ready? Leo asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Laureen turned to him, her violet eyes shining with quiet determination. I am. Leo took a deep breath, trying to push down the anxiety that gnawed at his insides. He had no plan, no backup, just the hope that they could escape or survive the coming confrontation. He glanced at the entrance once more. The soldiers were closing in. They were almost at the mouth of the cave. Leo could hear their boots crunching over the wet ground. Suddenly, a voice echoed from outside. Search the area. The signal's coming from this direction. The voice was sharp, commanding. Leo's blood ran cold. The colonists were looking for them, looking for Lorraine, but Leo wasn't about to let them take her. "They won't stop," Leo said, his voice low, filled with quiet resolve. "We have to fight back." Lorraine gave a slight nod, understanding the weight of his words. "We don't need to fight them all," she said softly. "We just need to make them leave." Leo turned to face her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She smiled, though it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I have a way to make them rethink their mission." Leo didn't have time to question her. The soldiers were almost there. He needed to act. "Then let's do it," he said, taking one last look at the entrance. "I won't let them take you." Lorraine stepped forward, positioning herself in front of Leo, her stance confident. She raised the orb high above her head, and with a single press of a button, a deep, humming sound filled the air. The orb began to glow brighter, the light pulsating in rhythmic waves. "What's happening?" Leo asked, his eyes widening. Lorraine's voice was calm, almost serene. "This is a signal to my people. They will hear it. They will come." Leo's heart skipped a beat. "Your people? You mean they'll help us?" Lorraine's eyes locked with his. "Yes, they will come, but not like before. This time, we are not running. We are standing." The soldiers' voices grew louder now, and Leo could see the faint outline of figures approaching. The light from their helmets flickered in the rain-soaked night. They were moments away from entering the cave. Leo's breath caught in his throat. He could feel the tension building, the silence between them almost unbearable. This was the moment. Everything they had done, every step they had taken, had led to this. Lorraine's fingers tightened around the orb, and she moved to the mouth of the cave, standing tall as if she were preparing to face an army alone. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Leo stood behind her, his heart pounding, but he didn't back down. He stood with her, his hands clenched into fists, determined to protect her. The first soldier appeared at the entrance of the cave, his helmet light flashing in the dark. He stopped when he saw them standing there, Lorraine holding the glowing orb like a beacon of defiance. "Stop right there," the soldier called out, his voice sharp with authority. Leo didn't move. Neither did Lorraine. "Tell your commander to leave us alone," Lorraine said, her voice strong and clear. The soldier's eyes widened as he saw the orb in her hands. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice trembling slightly. Lorraine's eyes didn't leave his. "It's a message. A warning. A promise." The soldier hesitated, his gaze flicking to Leo, and then back to Lorraine. He looked confused, unsure of what to do. He raised his weapon slightly, but his hand shook. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Leo said, his voice steady. "We're not running anymore. We're not hiding. If you want us, you'll have to take us by force." There was a moment of silence, and for a second, Leo thought the soldier might hesitate. He thought maybe, just maybe, the truth of Lorraine's words would make them stop. But then, more soldiers appeared at the entrance, their faces hidden behind helmets, their weapons raised. "Lorraine, we need tow." Leo began, but he was cut off by the loud hum of the orb. The light from the orb surged, brighter than before. The ground beneath them seemed to shake slightly, and a deep, resonant sound filled the cave. The soldiers faltered, their weapons lowering slightly as they looked at the orb in fear and confusion. "I warned you," Lorraine said softly, her eyes fixed on the soldiers. "You came to take us, but you did not understand who we are." Suddenly, the hum of the orb reached its peak, and with a sudden burst, the light shot up into the sky, cutting through the rain-soaked air. It was a signal, and Leo could feel that this wasn't just about them anymore. The soldiers took a step back, unsure of what to do next. The storm outside had nothing on the power that was radiating from Lorraine, and Leo knew with every fiber of his being that this was just the beginning.